There is a new Swordsoul combo that makes this deck incredibly crazy. With Arch Nemesis Protos fresh off the ban list, there's actually a way for Swordsoul to destroy some of the top meta decks. Snake Eyes, Branded, and Voiceless Voice, they all have to fear this combo. In today's video, not only will I show you a unique perspective at playing Swordsoul, I'll even be showing you some devastating combos because of the new ban list that allow you to play under Nibiru and also destroy some of the top decks. Let's jump on in. Before we get into this profile, I would like to break down something with you guys really quickly. As you guys already know, I do have my coat moments, but overall, I'm a realist. I would never want to mislead you in information that would have you go down the wrong path. With that being said, I do think that Swordsoul is a strong Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but I think more importantly, we should look over the facts. Swordsoul has not received any meaningful support since Burst of Destiny, which is 2021. And while thankfully the core still remains a pretty big impact over that course of time, one thing that I want to point out is that if you're going to try to play Swordsoul the same way that you played in 2021 or even 2023, you may have some very different results. I'm not saying that my way is the only way to play Swordsoul, but if you are looking to play Swordsoul with a ton of hand traps, there are strategies that do it a lot more efficiently. Today I'm going to be explaining to you what I think would be one of the better ways to consider playing Swordsoul, and of course I'll be giving you guys budget options as well as combo tutorials if you stay tuned to the video. Your starters for the deck remain relatively the same. There's 3 copies of Swordsoul Moye, 3 copies of Ecclesia, 2 copies of Taya, 3 copies of Swordsoul Strategist Long Yuan, 3 copies of Emergence. This is the bread and butter for Swordsoul Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, and if you want your deck to be as consistent as possible, you should strongly consider maxing out as many copies as you should play into the deck. Overall, these are your starter Yu-Gi-Oh cards and your extender cards to some degree. There is one more extender that I play inside of the deck, but first let's talk about Swordsoul Blackout. This card is amazing. It's pretty standard in Swordsoul, and Swordsoul Sacred Summit is a card that players have been playing on and off. I decided to play it is because I expect Nibiru the Primal Being to be a lot more prevalent in Yu-Gi-Oh! With Baron de Fleur and Borreload Savage Dragon being banned, I think that Swordsoul does need another way to continue on with this extension. This card not only provides that extension in case you do get Nibiru, it's also an excellent card to draw in the later stages of the game because it can reset your board. But like I said before, big dog, those are incredibly basic, the normal cards that you would play for Swordsoul, and pretty much the same goes for the Tingy monsters. There's 3 copies of Ashina, 3 copies of Vishuddha, 2 copies of Adara. One of the biggest things that I mentioned about Swordsoul and other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies is that this deck has not received any meaningful support in 3 years, but it does play interesting cards that other strategies cannot. Vishuddha is one of them. With big time effect negations being negated, players are going to have to decide between card effects that can negate spells or traps, sometimes monsters. A new card that I'm trying out right now is Tingy Spirit Mapora. Now there are a couple of pros to playing Mapora over Shathana. The first is that your Boxia Brightness of Yangzing can spend 2 cards naturally because you're using a fire and a water. The next thing is that it is a different attribute to be able to summon your Arch Nemesis Proto. And lastly, Mapora's effect is not bad. If your opponent were to target one of your normal monsters, take for example your Swordsoul tokens, you can negate the activation and destroy it. A lot of players are hip to this deck. They're getting rid of the token, and if they happen to have any cards that target, take for example Promethean Princess, you can stop it with this card. Now I've always been a fan of Heavenly Dragon Circle, and I would run 3 if I had the room. This card is crazy good because it is a way for you to be able to dodge cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Failure, but it also allows you to be able to get your follow-up from your deck to your hand. But another card I really wanted to play is Vessel for the Dragon Cycle. Now a lot of Swordsoul players drop Vessel of the Dragon Cycle. I think that it's really important that we bring it back. The main reason is that it is a way to be able to play around Nibiru. If you just so happen to have any of these monsters in your hand, plus Vessel of the Dragon Cycle, you can synchro summon into Xiaofeng, which prevents your opponent from activating light monster effects. Nibiru just so happens to be one of them. Also, even if you don't have these monsters in your hand, if your opponent Nibiru's you, it just so happens to be a non-effect monster, that Vessel can send one of these to the graveyard and allow you to get a Tingy monster from your deck to your hand, allowing you to potentially extend your play. I think Vessel for the Dragon Cycle is better than Crossout Designator, and it's because it doesn't force you to play cards inside of your deck to stop your opponent's cards. But more importantly, Vessel for the Dragon Cycle has more versatility in this deck. But if you guys know me, then you know that I'm just a Crossout Designator hater, so I don't think that it's incorrect to play this, but if you are going to be playing this deck with a ton of hand traps, you'll soon start to realize how far behind on the 8-ball you are in comparison to modern decks. One copy of Arch Nemesis Protoss. This card is crazier in the TCG than in Master Duel, and the main reason is because since we're in real life events, a lot of times you can get the information of what your opponent is playing and preemptively declare Arch Nemesis Protoss' effect. Another thing is that since we do have Game 2s and Game 3s, this card does become more potent because you can summon it when you're following games, and now that you know what your opponent's playing, you'll know that attribute. Also, because Fire is one of the best decks in the room, there is an FTK involving this card and the Fire strategies that I'll show you later in the video. Of course, if you cannot afford Arch Nemesis Protoss, all you have to do is pretty much just wait. The card's going to be fairly cheap really soon. But hypothetically, if you wanted to play this deck right now without Protoss, I would cut this card for a third copy of Heavenly Dragon Circle. It makes your deck a little bit more consistent. So far, I think that these 30 cards make up the basis of Swordsoul. Now, the remaining 12 cards really depends on you. Some players are playing hand traps, which is going to be 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Infinite Impermanent. Those 2 cards are still the top hand traps being played inside of the deck. And then there's 3 copies of Effect Veiler and 3 Nibiru, complementary cards allowing you to be able to negate more monster effects and break combo decks boards. But through my years of playing Swordsoul, I've noticed that there is a huge problem with going with that philosophy in playing Swordsoul. Swordsoul is no longer the best deck to play a ton of hand traps, disrupt your opponent, and 1-card combo. But what Swordsoul does do better than most decks is play amazing going second and naturally can break boards. This deck isn't necessarily built to go second, but if it does go second, it actually has crazy opportunities to be able to disrupt the opponent and break the board. Let's break down what I'm playing. There's 2 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust, 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent, 3 copies of Pot of Desires, 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet, 1 copy of Evenly Matched, and 1 copy of Sales Ban. Now, the reason why I decided to go with these cards is because Triple Tactics Thrust can not only search cards like Evenly Matched and Sales Ban, even Triple Tactics Talent, it also can search very powerful spell cards that can get me started like Swordsoul Emergence and Vessel for the Dragon Cycle, but also get me really good defensive cards like Swordsoul Blackout. Essentially, Triple Tactics Talent is pretty good when going first or going second in this deck in case you get hand trapped. Forbidden Droplet serves multiple roles. It allows me to be able to get monsters into my graveyard to be able to summon Arch Nemesis Protoss, and allows me to be able to dress the board that my opponent is playing. And now let's talk about both Sales Ban and Evenly Matched. Like I said before, this deck wasn't built to go second, but in case I do go second, I do technically play 3 copies of Evenly Matched, and with cards like Baron and Borreload Savage both being banned, this card in theory is a lot stronger than when people will give it credit. I think Evenly Matched is a solid Yu-Gi-Oh card right now, but what I really want to talk about is Sales Ban. What's cool about this card is that this deck doesn't really play any cards that other strategies in the game are playing, which means that when you activate the effect of Sales Ban, you can declare just about anything your opponent's playing, and the effect that you can't use the effect for the rest of the duel does not apply to you. I think Sales Ban is a sneaky card in here that can be searchable with Triple Tactics Thrust, but let's say, for example, you can't afford Triple Tactics Thrust. Well, that's pretty simple. You can drop the Evenly Match, and I would say you have 2 options. I think that Lightning Storm and Heartbeat's Feather Duster are ironically really good cards right now. You could also not play Triple Tactics Thrust and Talents, and this would be a 40-card deck, or you could consider playing more Sales Ban. I know it sounds weird, but this card is pretty good. I really want to know what you guys are thinking. What would you do? Would you guys go right back to your hand traps? Or would you guys decide to play more board breaker cards, or do what I'm doing, playing cards that help you with going first and going second? But let's go ahead and move into the extra deck before we get into a couple of combos. There is the standard 2 copies of Shishao, 1 copy of Draco, 1 Yazi, 2 Boxia. I thought about running 3, but 3 normally doesn't come up. 1 Dragon Rizite, 1 Xiaofeng, which is now mandatory. For the 10s, there's Xingying and Xinglong Yuan. If you want to play a 3rd level 10, you can play Ice Jade Jimmer Agra, and this card is actually really good. Or you can play Psychic in Punisher. The choice is yours between these 2. And then lastly, there's 3 Monk of the Tingyi and 1 Shaman of the Tingyi. And that is it for the extra deck. Let me show you guys these cool combos. So the Nibiru Booth combo is fairly simple. I did show this in my last video, and I do want to point out that yes, you can get Nibiru'd, but this is before committing a normal summon, so normally you're a-okay. This also is a combo that can get you into your starter cards, so in case you don't fear Nibiru, it's still really good to have. What you would do is special summon Ashina to your side of the field, then use Ashina for a link into Monk of the Tingy. And now you can activate Vessel of the Dragon Cycle. You can send Vishuda to the graveyard to add Adara. Special summon Adara to your side of the field, and because you control a non-effect monster, you can activate your Ashina. Use Ashina to be able to special summon your Vishuda number 2, and then synchro summon into 8. Now the monster that you'll synchro summon into is your Boxia Brightness of Yangzing. This would be summon 5, I believe, but again, if your opponent decides to stop this, then you have it normal summon. You can then follow up with your normal Swordsoul combo. But from here, you can use the effect of Boxia destroying your Monk of the Tingy to be able to summon out your Adara, and now you'll synchro with your Boxia and your Adara to be able to summon Xiaofeng. The Xiaofeng was made with a light monster, so your opponent cannot use light monster effects. Meaning, Voiceless Voice is already hard countered with this deck, and Nibiru and Effect Veiler no longer exists. Now, ironically, that exact same combo can also be used to shut some of the top meta decks in the game down. This can be done with Ashina plus any of the Tingy monsters, which is Vishuda and Adara, or any Tingy monster plus Vessel of the Dragon Cycle. Let me show you how it's done. You're going to first start off by special summoning Ashina, using it for a link for Monk of the Tingy, then activating Vessel of the Dragon Cycle, sending a Tingy monster to the graveyard to gain a Tingy monster to your hand. Whether it's Vishuda you're sending or Adara, it does not matter. Special summon Vishuda to your side of the field, and then use the effect of Ashina to be able to special summon Adara. The only difference here is that when you synchro summon, you're going to synchro summon into Shishao. And then this time around, you're going to use Shishao to get Swordsoul Emergence. Activate the effect of your Adara since you control a non-effect monster to add Ashina to your hand, and use both Shishao and Monk of the Tingy for Shaman. Use the effect of Shaman, sending Ashina to the graveyard to be able to special summon back your Shishao. And since you do control a synchro monster, you can activate Emergence to be able to add Archnemesis Protos to your hand. Now, since you have monsters with different attributes, here's an Earth, here's a Light, here's a Dark, you can summon Protos to your side of the field, and because you control a Fire, Dark, or Light monster, you can use the effect of Protos, declaring any of these 3 attributes to prevent your opponent from special summoning those attributes on their following turn. This combo right here makes Swordsoul a fairly deadly deck going into the meta, because if your opponent simply has no counters, they outright lose the game. Of course, there's some other cool combos that you guys could be doing, and I'll be putting test hands on my Patreon as a special thank you for helping me pay my editors. Until then, you guys can check out these other videos so I can catch you on the next one.